quick survey. Make sure you're with me this morning. What is something that you have lost that has been frustrating when you're looking for it? It gives you a sense of urgency. Show of hands. Give me ideas. Yes. Heather? Retainer. Wow. Gosh, that throws me back. I remember. Yes, Miles.
I was going to say the jingles, the keys. Yeah. People were jingling their keys.
Oh, car keys. Okay. Other ones. What else have you lost? Betsy? Wallet. iPhone. Anything else? Watch. People still wear watches. Anything else that you've lost? Glasses. Up there, Tom? Wedding band. You better be careful, my friend. You found it 6 months later. Gosh, and the marriage continues to this day. Anything else that you've lost that you... Okay. Well, I hate to admit, but there have been times where I've lost things, and I have been looking for, it seems like 20 minutes, and I realize this is like taking my life away. And sometimes it is just my glasses or my cell phone. But still, you feel like without these certain things, you can't move on until you find it. And what you'll hear me say is, it's in the house somewhere. I didn't leave, And you'll find it sometimes in the most obvious places, sometimes in the weirdest places ever. I even do it here. So people here during the week might see me running around because I'll leave my glasses in the kitchen and back in the sound area. Anyway, wallets, cell phones, keys. What gets even harder, though, is like pets. When I was a little kid, our dog would run away, and that was, terrifying. Driving around, whistling, calling. And then one of our dogs could run like 20 miles an hour, just take off. Literally, 5 miles away, we would find Toby running around looking crazy. Anyway, that feeling, though, it's a difficult feeling. And that is kind of the theme today of, we can't even imagine how God must feel when people are struggling, when they feel lost, when they're wandering, when they have difficult life issues, when they feel astray, when they feel alone. Can you imagine what it must be like to be looking for your very children? According to the available data, the average person spends around 2.5 days per year searching for things. That's a lot. 17 hours annually. I didn't know it took me that much time, but apparently it does. What lengths do you go to find things? I'm not buying another cell phone. I'm not getting another, right? You tell yourself in your head, I'm not buying another pair of glasses. I'm finding them, whatever it takes. Well, today we will explore that type of reckless abandon that God has to find us, to do whatever it takes. But before we do, a little background. We're going to begin this series, this Lenten series on the parables. It's our stories that Jesus told, and we're going to try to take some fresh angle approaches. Some of these stories, if you've been around in the church, you've heard them for years. And honestly, I am myself personally going on a journey looking at them from a different angle, looking at Jesus from a different angle. What was he teaching here? Why would he tell this story? A man named Anthony DeMello was a Jesuit priest and a writer, and he says this: the shortest distance between a human being and the truth is a story. The shortest distance between a human being and the truth, or God, is a story. We can relate to stories. Our very lives are wrapped up in our own stories. But think about the books you love, the books you've read, and how you get wrapped up in those stories. Your favorite TV shows, the storyline, You think about the script writers and the people putting together the video montage for these shows. And these movies, many movies based on books, but other movies just a pure script, a story. And often those stories in these books and these television shows and these movies have stories of redemption, people finding their way, people reinventing themselves. Even video games have storylines underneath them now, don't they? Theater, comedy, children's fables, poems, music. Lest I forget, Facebook and TikTok. What draws you to those things? Guess what? Stories. People's stories. We love stories. We connect to each other through stories. They bring us meaning in life. This must be why, when Jesus was often asked a question, he responded with a parable, a story. Now, over the years, when I've looked at the parables, I would definitely be looking for myself. I'd be trying to figure out who is God in this story, who are the people, what is happening here, kind of looking for direct, literal interpretation of the message of the story. What I've discovered through the years is the parables are deeper. Yes, sometimes some of the parables have some obvious characters, but a lot of the time they are just stories providing us different teachings and meanings. Now, the problem we have 2,000 years later is these stories are locked into an agricultural life with kings and slaves and wineskins and lamps and seeds and farming and goats. Most of us, maybe at the petting zoo, is where we see a goat, right? But for audiences in Jesus' day, these parables sounded bizarre because he was using everyday things to flip the script on what people were thinking life and religion were all about. I think, what if Jesus were walking around today? Would you hear a story like, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who lost his iPhone on the subway in New York? Right? That would be a difficult find, wouldn't it? Well-known theologian and speaker Nadia Bolz-Weber notes, while we want a parable to have a nice, neat moral lesson that can be reduced to a meme or a tweet, in reality, trying to nail down a parable to one meaning is like trying to nail Jell-O to a tree. The parables, you like the image, don't you? See, that's a parable right there, Jell-O, tree, nail. The parables are endless sources of meaning, and depending on where you're at in your life, they may have different meanings to you throughout time. A parable is not ordinarily used to tell us something new, but to get us to notice something that's already been there. That's already the way life is working. Or maybe the way life isn't working so well. The parable helps us notice these things. Using words, God brings us revelation. Today's reading is from a series of what are called the parables about lostness. We have the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son in Luke chapter 15. Such a form of communication was not necessarily invented by Christ. In fact, parables were common rabbinic teachings, ways to interpret Scripture, ways to interpret spiritual history. But if you look at the life of Christ, parables were 1/3 of what he said. That's a lot. God is like an artist. And if you look at the teaching, sometimes we're looking for these clear PowerPoint points. Just like this, and this is all you need to know. walk out, I'm good to go. But it seems like when you look at the scriptures, God is more like an artist painting things. And you stand there sometimes and look at the painting like, what am I getting here? What is this artist trying to say? That seems to be more like life. Speaking of art, I want to lift up a well-known artist. Her name is Alma Thomas. And we do have a picture here. Alma Thomas was an African-American woman, came up through segregation, taught in middle school art class, if you can believe that, for 35 years. And it wasn't until later that she became a professional artist and began to have her work shown in museums and galleries. And this famous painting, called The Resurrection, is now in the White House, thanks to Michelle Obama. It is permanently there. The first painting by an African American to make it into the White House. Alma Thomas is a graduate of Howard University. In fact, she was the first graduate of Howard University's art department. In 2021, a museum sold Thomas's painting, which is called Alma's Flower Garden, for $2.8 million. Okay? Talk about success. Alma Thomas had a self-proclaimed reckless love for children and art. A reckless love, she said. In fact, she loved art so much, she never married. Art was her passion. Most of us haven't thought about the parable of the lost sheep as art, let alone it's a parable about reckless abandon. My initial readings for many years of these lost parables in Luke chapter 15, and this is my phrase, were kind of lovey-dovey parables. Oh, isn't it nice? God goes after the sheep. The one sheep is lost, and God cares for all of us. That is true. But when you really pull this parable apart, a real farmer or shepherd would say, are you kidding me? You're going to leave the 99 to go get the one? Not in my book. I can't leave the 99 sheep and go get the one. I will lose the one to keep the 99. I cannot leave them to go get the one. I will sacrifice that one. I cannot go for the sake of the flock. So when Jesus says this parable about the shepherd leaving the flock to go get the one, as an example of how God works in the world, that actually angered people. That angered people. What are you talking about? Well, again, as Jesus came to speak to both the Israelites and the Gentiles, to the Israelites first, from the beginning of time, God has been reaching out to all of humankind with love and purpose and grace, beauty, using the nation of Israel as a vehicle for that love to come out to the world, to demonstrate God's character to us, that God doesn't give up. Even on this imperfect, little, tiny, weak nation, God was speaking and working through them. And so when Jesus says, well, you got to leave the flock and go get the one, it's kind of like he's saying, you're with God right now. You know God. God's been with this nation for so long. We've got to care about those people who don't know yet. Those who are wandering astray, getting hurt, feeling lonely. Let's look at the word sheep for a minute. The word sheep has gotten some bad PR recently in the political climate. Each side accusing the others of being sheep. The sheep, at least in this parable, They're trying to follow their shepherd. Now, sheep get a bad rap, but let's talk about this. I did some research on this. I don't know much about sheep personally. But apparently they are emotional animals, and they only know the voice of their shepherd. They're emotionally attached to their shepherd. So if a stranger comes, a stranger human, they fear them. They run away from them. They flee. And of course, wolves and other people, other animals coming after them. So they stay together to be strong and to listen to their shepherd's voice. They get anxious and distressed very easily, so they stick together. Now, a farmer tells a story about the weakness with that. He says that you can put a rope in front of a barn door, and the sheep will see that, and they'll begin to jump over the rope as they exit the barn. You take the rope away, and the rest of the sheep keep jumping because that's what they saw. That's how much they follow each other. And so sheep can lead other sheep astray. So often you will have more than one sheep who is lost, who needs help, who is hurting, who feels abandoned, who's wondering where their shepherd is. We can learn a lot from these sheep because we might find ourselves. Being a sheep is not a bad thing. And if you look at yourself, or humankind in general, we are all following something or someone. We're looking for something to follow. What is leading you is the question. Do you hear the voice of the shepherd Christ calling out to you? Or are there other things louder in your life that have led you away from the other sheep? In the retelling of these parables, I am rediscovering how God is working, how God does care about each one. And I'm remembering that passion of what we'll do even just for one person. I came across a story this week down at Central United Methodist Church in Detroit. There's a program called Noah, N-O-A-H, Noah at Central. And there's a man named Dwight. 2023, Dwight came to Noah for lunch. The people at Noah heard his story. He had a serious heart condition, which led to a long-term hospitalization, which led to Dwight losing his home and his job. And so he was struggling with housing. When he began coming to Noah for services, he reflected how quickly he felt seen and valued. He said, "They didn't just check a box. They really cared about what was happening to me. And they helped get me back on my feet." He says, "Noah never let me lose hope or fall through the cracks. Even when things got hard, they were up front with me, and we worked on it together." One person, one story, one life changed by a ministry. If you haven't experienced that type of joy of helping someone, even just one time, you're missing out. It's amazing to be able to be used by God to find sheep who are struggling. It could be right in front of you. It could be in your own family, a friend, someone you frequently see at the store. And you just engage in a conversation. You never know how you might bring hope or light to another person's story by letting your story interact with their story. There are times we can even be in church for years and feel astray, feel lost. What am I doing here? What is my purpose on this earth? Especially when those troubles come. And then you long for the voice of the shepherd. So God has this reckless abandon that Jesus is teaching about. God gathers us like a flock, but God cares just as much about those folks out there who don't have a flock, who are struggling to make ends meet, not just financially, but emotionally making ends meet. Maybe health crises, relational, financial. We've come a long way as a church, but in this day and age, we're really going to have to step up this desire to be living with this reckless abandon, to take risks here and there, to reach that one. Maybe you feel led to help people in another country who are struggling. Now that U.S. aid has been cut off, things like UMCOR are even more important. Organizations and agencies that give to help needs around the world. One person could be helped, even with a $10 gift. Right here locally, the food gatherers, I talked to them this week, they're getting hit hard. Around the country, the food banks are very busy as people have lost jobs. Unemployment lines are growing. The church stepping into that gap with that reckless abandon to say, we're going to do it. We don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it. We want to make a difference. That's the dream of God. And so like that sheep in that story, God comes looking for us. The Lord is busy, looking for us, asking us to partner, to be shepherds here on earth. There are sheep who are hiding under bushes. There are sheep who are hurting, lost, and you can see it's obvious. There are sheep who feel lonely, and Jesus is calling to them, wants to guide them home, and bring us and everyone together along the way. Amen.